The mop hit the linoleum with a wet slap as Sarah Martinez pushed it across the barracks floor. Steam rose from the bucket beside her, carrying the sharp scent of industrial cleaner that had become as familiar as her own breath. Through the windows, she could see the SEAL team returning from their morning exercises, their voices carrying across the courtyard with the easy confidence of men who knew their worth. Petty Officer Jackson was the loudest, as always. He's probably telling them about his latest range scores again, Sarah thought, wringing out the mop with practiced efficiency. The water swirled gray in the bucket, picking up the dust and grime that seemed to settle endlessly in this place. The barracks door swung open with a bang, and boots thundered across her freshly cleaned floor. Sarah stepped back against the wall, making herself small and invisible as the SEALs filed past. They barely glanced at her, these elite warriors who moved through the world like they owned it. Where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there? This story of hidden strength resonates across every military base, in every corner of our global community. Jackson paused near her cart, his eyes scanning the cleaning supplies with casual disdain. Time to see what happens next, Sarah thought, her grip tightening imperceptibly on the mop handle. You'd think they'd at least say "excuse me," Jackson muttered to his teammate Rodriguez as they tracked mud across Sarah's clean floor. But I guess janitors don't rate basic courtesy from real operators. Sarah continued mopping, her movements steady and methodical. She had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival skill in places like this. Let them think what they wanted to think. Let them see only what they expected to see. Rodriguez chuckled, dropping his gear bag with deliberate carelessness near her supply cart. Yeah, I heard she's been here 6 months now. Command must be scraping the bottom of the barrel for support staff these days. The comment stung more than Sarah cared to admit, but her face remained impassive. She had heard worse, endured worse, and still she remained. There were reasons for that, reasons these men couldn't begin to understand. Jackson kicked at a bucket, sending a small splash of dirty water across the floor Sarah had just cleaned. Oops, he said with mock concern. Looks like you missed a spot there, sweetheart. Have you ever been in a situation where people completely underestimated what you were capable of? Sometimes the most powerful people are hiding in plain sight. Sarah knelt to clean up the spill, her jaw tight but her hands steady. Soon enough, she thought. Very soon, everything would change. The days blended together in a rhythm of cleaning and quiet endurance. Sarah arrived before dawn each morning, her footsteps echoing through empty corridors as she prepared for another day of being overlooked. The base was coming alive around her, but she moved like a ghost through its halls. Commander Hayes had assigned her to the most visible areas, the places where the elite units gathered and boasted about their latest missions. It was supposed to be punishment, she knew, though Hayes had never said as much directly. Keep the troublemaker where we can watch her, was the unspoken message. But Sarah didn't mind the visibility. It gave her opportunities to observe, to learn the patterns and personalities of the men who thought themselves untouchable. Jackson was predictable in his cruelty, always needing an audience for his jokes. Rodriguez followed his lead but lacked conviction. The others were sheep, going along because it was easier than standing up. This morning brought a new face to the group. Chief Petty Officer Morrison had transferred in from Coronado, his reputation preceding him like a shadow. Morrison doesn't tolerate weakness, she had overheard in the mess hall. He'll eat that cleaning girl alive if she gets in his way. Sarah wrung out her mop and smiled grimly. Let him try. Morrison's arrival changed the dynamic immediately. Where Jackson had been content with casual mockery, Morrison brought a harder edge, a systematic cruelty that made the other SEALs uncomfortable. Sarah could see it in their faces when he pushed too far, but none of them had the courage to speak up. The new chief made it his personal mission to find fault with Sarah's work. He would run white gloves along surfaces she had just cleaned, searching for invisible dust. He would deliberately spill coffee and demand she clean it while he watched, timing her with theatrical precision. Sarah endured it all with the same quiet dignity that had carried her through harder trials than these men could imagine. But she noticed things too. Morrison's left shoulder favored slightly from an old injury. His shooting stance compensated in a way that would affect accuracy at distance. Jackson's dominant eye wasn't the one he thought it was. Small details, but details that mattered to someone with Sarah's background. Details that could prove useful when the time came. The morning that everything changed started like any other. Sarah was cleaning the team room when Morrison burst through the doors, his face flushed with excitement. "Emergency training exercise," he announced to his men. "Active shooter scenario in Building C. Real ammunition, real pressure. Time to separate the warriors from the wannabes." The alarm pierced through the morning quiet like a blade. Sarah watched from the supply closet as the SEALs scrambled for their gear, their earlier arrogance replaced by focused intensity. This wasn't a drill anymore. Building C housed the base communications center, and intelligence suggested hostile infiltrators had taken positions on the upper floors. Real bullets, real stakes. Morrison barked orders while his team checked weapons and equipment with the precision of men who knew their lives depended on preparation. Sarah continued organizing cleaning supplies, but her eyes tracked every movement, every decision. She could see the tactical problems they were missing, the angles they hadn't considered. The communication building's eastern approach had blind spots that the infiltrators would exploit. The stairwell funneled defenders into kill zones. Jackson was nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he loaded magazines. Rodriguez kept checking his scope adjustments repeatedly. Even Morrison showed signs of tension, his jaw working as he studied building schematics that told only part of the story. What would you do if you saw people walking into danger, but knew they'd never listen to your warnings? Sometimes the hardest part isn't having the skills, it's waiting for the right moment to use them. Sarah closed the supply closet and picked up her mop bucket. Time to get closer to the action. The SEAL team moved toward Building C with textbook precision, but Sarah could see the fatal flaw in their approach. They were treating this like a standard breach and clear, not accounting for the elevated positions and crossfire zones that made this particular building a nightmare for conventional tactics. She followed at a distance, pushing her cart along the maintenance corridors that ran parallel to their route. Few people knew these passages existed, tunnels designed for utility access that provided hidden movement throughout the complex. Sarah had mapped every inch during her months of seemingly mindless cleaning. Through a service window, she watched Morrison's team stack up at the main entrance. Jackson was point man, his rifle trembling almost imperceptibly. Rodriguez covered the flanks while Morrison coordinated with base command through his radio. They have no idea what they're walking into, Sarah thought, recognizing the tactical signature of the building's defensive advantages. The infiltrators had chosen their position well, turning the communication center into a fortress that would chew up any frontal assault. Her fingers traced the outline of something hidden beneath her maintenance uniform, a familiar weight that had been with her longer than anyone on this base could imagine. Sometimes we hide our greatest strengths until the moment they're needed most. The first shots rang out, echoing through the corridors like thunder. The gunfire erupted in short, controlled bursts that told Sarah everything she needed to know about the situation inside. The infiltrators were disciplined, patient, picking their shots carefully from elevated positions. Morrison's team was pinned down in the lobby, their aggressive entry having walked them straight into a carefully prepared kill zone. Sarah moved through the maintenance tunnels with practiced silence, her cleaning cart abandoned in favor of speed. She could hear Morrison's voice over the radio, calling for backup and medical support. Jackson was hit, his voice tight with pain as he reported a shoulder wound. Rodriguez was providing covering fire, but his position was compromised. Through a ventilation grate, Sarah could see the tactical situation unfolding below. 3 hostile shooters had taken positions on the mezzanine level, their angles of fire creating overlapping fields that made movement impossible for the trapped SEALs. It was a professional setup, executed by people who understood the building's geography better than the defenders did. Morrison's training was failing him now. All his arrogance couldn't compensate for the simple reality that sometimes superior position trumps superior attitude. Sarah watched him realize that his team was outgunned and outmaneuvered, his confidence cracking under the weight of genuine tactical pressure. Have you ever watched someone's certainty crumble when they faced a challenge bigger than their ego? Reality has a way of humbling us all eventually. Time to even the odds. Sarah emerged from the maintenance tunnel onto the building's second floor, moving with the fluid precision of someone who had done this before. The sounds of combat echoed from below, punctuated by Morrison's increasingly desperate radio calls. His team was running out of ammunition and options. She positioned herself at a service hatch that provided a clear view of the mezzanine level where the infiltrators had established their firing positions. Through the metal grating, she could see their muzzle flashes, could read the rhythm of their shots and reloads. Professional operators, but they had made one critical mistake. They hadn't accounted for the maintenance level. Sarah's hand moved to the concealed compartment in her uniform, withdrawing something that gleamed dully in the emergency lighting. Her fingers found familiar grooves and contours, muscle memory taking over as she made subtle adjustments with the confidence of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times before. Below, Jackson's voice cracked over the radio. "We're taking heavy fire, Chief. Can't hold this position much longer." Morrison's response carried the edge of panic he was trying to hide. "Hold fast, Jackson. Backup is en route." But Sarah knew backup wouldn't arrive in time. The mathematics of the situation were clear, written in angles of fire and rates of ammunition consumption. Morrison's elite team had perhaps 3 minutes before their position became completely untenable. 3 minutes to change everything. The silence between gunshots stretched like a held breath. Sarah could hear Morrison's labored breathing over the radio as he tried to coordinate a retreat that wasn't possible. The infiltrators had them locked down completely, their superior position turning the lobby into a shooting gallery. Rodriguez's voice came through broken with static and desperation. "Chief, Jackson's losing a lot of blood. We need to move him, but every time we try to shift position they light us up." Sarah studied the angles one final time, calculating distances and wind patterns that existed only in the building's climate control system. The shot would have to be perfect, threading between structural supports and accounting for the slight deflection caused by the ventilation airflow. She had made harder shots than this, under worse conditions, when the stakes were higher than the egos of men who had never respected her. But those missions were classified beyond the clearance level of anyone in this building. Those accomplishments would never appear on any record these SEALs could access. Morrison's voice cracked completely now. "Base Command, we are combat ineffective. Requesting immediate evacuation support." The response was devastating in its simplicity. "Negative, Morrison. Building is sealed. No extraction possible until hostile threat is neutralized." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of decision settle across her shoulders. When she opened them again, they held the cold focus of someone who had crossed this threshold many times before. Sarah moved with deadly precision through the maintenance corridor, arriving at a position that would have been impossible for Morrison's team to reach. The infiltrators had planned for conventional assault routes, but they hadn't accounted for someone who knew every hidden passage in the building. The first shot broke the silence like thunder, but it wasn't Sarah's weapon that fired. One of the infiltrators had spotted movement in the lobby and unleashed a controlled burst that sent Morrison diving for cover behind an overturned desk. That muzzle flash gave Sarah everything she needed. Distance, elevation, wind compensation, target acquisition. Her weapon rose with the smooth certainty of someone who had performed this dance countless times before in places these men would never see. The shot was perfect. The infiltrator on the eastern position dropped silently, his weapon clattering to the mezzanine floor. His companion spun toward the sound, trying to identify the new threat, but Sarah was already adjusting her aim for the second target. Another shot. Another clean hit. Morrison's voice carried a note of confusion as he reported to Base Command. "Unknown friendly is engaging hostiles. Someone's up there taking them out." Have you ever witnessed a moment when everything you thought you knew turned out to be completely wrong? Sometimes the most unlikely people carry the greatest surprises. The third infiltrator was scanning desperately now, but Sarah had already moved to a new position. The final infiltrator broke from his position in desperation, firing wildly as he tried to reach better cover. His shots went high and wide, panic destroying the discipline that had made him dangerous moments before. Sarah tracked his movement with the calm patience of a hunter who had never missed when it mattered. The third shot ended the threat permanently. Silence descended over Building C like a heavy blanket. Morrison's voice crackled over the radio, uncertain and shaken. All hostiles down. Unknown sniper has neutralized the threat. Building is secure. Sarah was already moving, descending through maintenance shafts toward the lobby where Morrison's team was struggling to their feet. Jackson's shoulder wound needed attention, and Rodriguez looked pale with adrenaline crash, but they were alive because someone they had never respected had intervened from shadows they didn't even know existed. She emerged from a service door near the lobby, still carrying her weapon with casual familiarity. Morrison spotted her first, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the woman he had spent weeks tormenting, now holding a precision rifle like it was an extension of her body. "The cleaning lady," Rodriguez whispered, his voice carrying disbelief that bordered on shock. Sarah approached Morrison with the same steady pace she had used while mopping floors. She extended the rifle toward him, offering it grip first with a slight smile that held years of quiet satisfaction. "Your building is clean, Chief," she said simply. The warehouse district stretched before Marcus Chen like a sleeping giant, its concrete corridors bathed in the amber glow of security lights. His footsteps echoed with military precision as he walked his rounds, each turn calculated, each shadow assessed with the trained eye of someone who had once saved lives in far more dangerous places. Marcus adjusted his security guard uniform and checked his watch. 2:15 in the morning. In 5 hours, he would be making breakfast for Lily, helping her choose clothes for school, and pretending that 8 hours of sleep was enough to fuel another day of loving fatherhood. The radio on his belt crackled with static from the dispatch center. "All quiet on the east side," came the tinny voice. Marcus pressed the button and responded with his usual calm professionalism. "East patrol clear, continuing rounds." He paused at the chain-link fence overlooking the industrial park, watching a stray cat pick through shadows near the loading docks. 8 years since Sarah died, 8 years of nights like this, 8 years of being both mother and father while the world slept around him.